So a lot of people are having trouble paying their rent right now. And that is, I mean, you are not at all the only one. Everyone's in the same boat here. But this is the information that we can give you as of right now that might be helpful.
Welcome to the virtual hour from the NKCDC Community Health Workers. My name is Robina, however you can call me Roro, and I am a community health worker at NKCDC. We are hosting weekly live streams with experts in order to keep bringing vital health information to the community during the COVID-19 lockdown. The community health workers at NKCDC are here to serve and advocate for our community. We bridge the gaps between people and health services by acting as advocates and helpers. This week, we're talking to Sherry and Sarah from the Legal Clinic for the Disabled. Sherry Thomas is the director of the Housing Initiative and concentrates her practice in tenant defense and tenants' rights. Sarah Zinn is a staff attorney where she practices in the areas of housing, guardianship, and general civil legal matters. We are grateful to Sherry and Sarah for sharing information about renters' rights and the latest changes to rules and help people can get in Philadelphia.
Thank you so much for having us today. Sarah and I here are both attorneys with the Legal Clinic for the Disabled. We want to speak with all of you about basic landlord-tenant law, but also all of the changes that have been happening due to COVID-19 and the stay-at-home orders. While we are attorneys, nothing that we say should be construed as legal advice. This is general guidance and information. But if you do have specific legal questions, you can always direct them to us. We have our contact information at the end of the presentation, or you can contact NKCDC so they can get in touch with us with your questions. Many times with cases, it largely depends on your facts and your case, and we would be happy to provide a one-on-one consultation for you. So without any further ado, I will share my screen here so we can get all this information to you. So a little bit about our clinic. The Legal Clinic for the Disabled, we've been around since 1990, and we've been providing free legal services for low-income individuals with chronic physical and mental health conditions in Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. You do not have to be on disability to get legal services from the Legal Clinic for the Disabled. We recognize that many people in our city are disabled and are dealing with chronic illnesses, but are continuing to work. So if you have a chronic condition that requires ongoing treatment or medications such as asthma, diabetes, back pain, high blood pressure, all of those things can have you qualify for our legal services. In addition, we do have an income requirement, but when you call into our clinic, we will assess for that and see whether you're qualified for the services. Our areas of practice are civil only. We do not practice in criminal court or traffic court, and we also don't take any fee generating cases. That means if you want to bring a lawsuit where you're suing someone for money, that's not something that the Legal Clinic could handle. However, we do landlord-tenant disputes, evictions, issues with welfare, Medicaid, family law matters, that's custody, support, domestic violence, basic estate planning. So if you need a simple will or you want power of attorney or guardianship done, we will do that. We also offer general legal advice and referrals. So while we're not able to take certain types of cases, if you do call us on our intake line, you will reach someone in person and they will go through the facts and assess your case, and we can give you a referral or point you in the right direction, even if it's something that our clinic cannot handle. So many of you are watching this because you are a renter in Philadelphia. So I want to go through some of the basic rights and responsibilities that you have as a renter and what you can expect from your landlord. When you first move into your property, you should have received a written copy of your lease signed by you and your landlord. I know some of you watching this video probably have a verbal or an oral lease with your landlord. This does not mean that your lease is invalid. It just means what we're saying is that a written lease is always best. It will lay out exactly what's expected of you and what's expected of your landlord. When you go to court, court will often look to solve your disputes based on the lease. The lease is a contract. So if it's something that's written down, it's a lot easier to get to the actual meat of the issues and see, you know, who's in the right and who's in the wrong. You should also receive something called a certificate of rental suitability. This certificate, this is for Philadelphia. The surrounding counties don't require this, but in Philadelphia, when you're renting, you get the certificate. Ideally, before you move in, it lays out for you that it's an affidavit, or it's your landlord telling you and signing this piece of paper saying that you're moving into a property that's suitable for human habitation. So in other words, the smoke alarms are working, the fire systems are working, there's proper heat, there's proper plumbing, and that the property is not in disrepair. So you should receive that along with your lease. The other thing you should receive with that certificate is something called the Partners for Good Housing Handbook. This is a wonderful handbook that your landlord is supposed to provide to you. You can always find it online, but your landlord is supposed to provide it to you under the law. And this lays out all of your rights and responsibilities as a tenant, and everything, all of the rights and responsibilities of your landlord as well. It's really great to look through if you're having repair issues. It lays out exactly who you need to call to get that done and what are the steps that you need to do that. If you have any children under the age of 6, your landlord should provide you with what we call a lead safe or lead free certificate. And this is for any property that's built before 1978. In Philadelphia, we have a lot of old properties, so more likely than not, your apartment or your house that you're living in was built before 1978. If you have a child under the age of 6, it's possible that the property was constructed or painted with lead paint, which is a health hazard. So your landlord needs to show that they had a lead inspector come into the property, test it, and that it is safe for children to be living there. There are some changes to this law coming up, and I will explain that in a later slide. Remember, for all of these documents that I'm sharing with you, that it is important that you keep them in a safe place, but probably the best way to keep track of everything is to take photos of your important documents. If you have a smartphone or cell phone, if you have a camera, take photos of those things and email them to yourself so you have them. We know that things get lost. You know, you might leave your papers out somewhere, but if you have a digital copy, that's the best way to protect yourself. Your lease. If you don't have your own copy, get one. Ask your landlord for it. Read it carefully. This is primarily going to be the thing that a court will look at to figure out what your rights are and what your responsibilities were and what your rights and responsibilities are for the landlord. This lease should say how much you're obligated to pay every month, what your due dates are, what the late fees are, what utilities you're responsible for, and what your landlord is responsible for. If you are responsible for some of the utilities, you want to be really clear about how you are getting billed. How are you supposed to get that money to the landlord? Will they collect it with the rent, or are you supposed to directly pay it to the utility company? What appliances were you promised in your lease? Do you get a fridge? Do you get an oven? And who's responsible for maintaining those things? What pets are allowed, if any? How many people are allowed to be in the property? That's another thing. And this is important that most people don't think about it until they get to court. But does your lease say anything about waiving a notice to vacate? If your landlord wants to start an eviction, they are supposed to give you something called a notice to vacate. That's supposed to give you notice that they are getting ready to file something unless you pay your rent or move out. Some leases waive this, meaning that your landlord, according to your lease, could file something in court without telling you, and the first time you would find out is when the court papers come to your house. You also want to check about legal fees and other fees. Most leases will say that if your landlord has to take you to court, that you are responsible for attorney's fees. In Pennsylvania, if your lease does not say that you are responsible for attorney's fees or legal fees, then your landlord cannot sue you for those fees. Okay, so make sure that you read your lease and check that provision or check that section to make sure that you know if you'll owe attorney's fees if you're taken to court. The certificate of rental suitability and rental license. So I mentioned these in the last slide. It is important because in Philadelphia, if your landlord does not give you a certificate of rental suitability, or if they do not have a rental license, you are legally not obligated or required to pay them rent for those months that they do not have those papers. However, I strongly advise you to call us and talk to a housing lawyer before you stop paying your rent due to the lack of these documents. You can look up online if your landlord has a rental license. You cannot look up online if they have a certificate of rental suitability. And if you look up online and you see that your landlord doesn't have a license and you decide not to pay rent, your landlord can still take you to court. You know, they won't stop that person from filing, and then it'll be up to you to defend it. But it is very on a case-by-case basis. I would never advise anyone to stop paying rent because they don't have these documents. Please call us and let us know what specifically is going on, and we would be happy to advise you. The lead safe certificate, I touched on this before. So for properties built before 1978, this certificate certifies that the property is lead safe or lead free. If the property is lead safe, then that's it. It's a one and done test. If your landlord tests it and it's lead safe, then it's fine. So if he gives you a certificate from several years ago, that's okay. If the property, or I'm sorry, if it was lead free. If the property is lead safe, it needs to be tested every 2 years. That certificate is only good for 2 years. As the law is today, this only applies to properties that have children who are 6 and under. In October of 2020, so this year, all properties are going to be required to have a lead safe or lead free certificate. This is being phased out throughout the city through different zip codes, so the rollout is not going to happen all at once. But just know that starting in October of 2020, all properties will be required to have a lead safe or lead free certificate. Unlawful housing discrimination. So there are a couple of things your landlord cannot do based on particular attributes, based on your race, national origin, your sex, sexual orientation, religion, disability, marital status, age, source of income, familial status, and status as a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault. Your landlord cannot refuse to rent to you because of any of this, make housing unavailable, negatively change the lease terms, or otherwise discriminate. If you think that you are being discriminated against, you can file a complaint with the Fair Housing Commission. If your landlord unlawfully discriminates against you or retaliates against you for exercising a legal right, you may have a basis for a claim. The Fair Housing Commission is where tenants can go to make these complaints. So for example, if you are having issues at the property, you don't have any running water, for example, you call your landlord, you contact them to repair the issue, and your landlord doesn't do it, but instead they give you a notice to vacate that they're filing against you or want to evict you. If you call license and inspection to repair something or to get your landlord cited for something, and then your landlord moves to evict you, that is possibly retaliation. These are the types of cases that the Fair Housing Commission will take. If you're experiencing something like that right now, where you have not paid your rent because of a repair issue or exercising some sort of right, then you can go online and submit a complaint to the Fair Housing Commission, and that information is here on this slide. Again, if you think you might have a claim, please call us, and we can definitely, you'll speak with an attorney and we'll be able to advise you and assess your case to see if it's appropriate for the Fair Housing Commission. You can always go directly to them as well. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who's going to go over some of the new developments in landlord-tenant law and what your rights as a renter are during this time of COVID-19.
Great, thank you so much, Sherry. If you would mind flipping over this slide. Okay, so let's start with some good news, because right now I think everybody could use some good news. So as of today, and I mean for the past couple of weeks, you've probably heard that in Philadelphia, that courts are not accepting any new eviction filings. This may not mean that if you have an existing eviction case, it's already been filed, it's already in court. This isn't necessarily referring to that. But if you haven't been in court yet, your landlord cannot evict you right now, either by filing an eviction claim, which is the only lawful way to evict somebody, or by trying to take it into their own hands, which is something I'll talk about a little bit more. So right now, you are not in danger of being evicted if you did not already have a case in court. That is going to be the case at least until June 1st, although, just as a caveat generally about this presentation, these laws are changing just by the minute. We're constantly getting new updates about, Supreme Court is issuing this order, this court is going to be doing this, the state governor is doing this. So please understand this information is only as of May 14th. If you're watching this at a later date, this may not exactly be current at the time that you're watching it. But of course, you can always call us if you have questions about that. So right now, also through June, there are no utility shutoffs. So that means electric, gas, water, landline, phones, none of those are going to get shut off right now if you can't pay those bills. Also, some of the utilities, not all of them, are also waiving new late fees. That means that they're not charging any new late fees. So let's say that you can pay for your electric right now, you just couldn't pay for it by your due date. You're not going to have a late fee attached to that payment that you couldn't make on time, at least as of right now. For PHA, those, if you're in PHA housing, you already know what this is, but the Philadelphia Housing Authority is an agency that handles certain subsidized rental properties. If you are making your rental payments to PHA, they're also foregoing any new late fees through July. If you're able to make payments right now, they're not going to give you any late fees for it. The Federal CARES Act is a legislation that was recently passed, and it's going to apply to anything which has a federally backed mortgage or it is federally funded housing. So this is going to include public housing, and it's going to include Section 8, by which I mean both housing choice voucher and project-based. So there's not going to be late charges, and there's not going to be evictions. Again, there's not new evictions. We can't tell you yet about if you already have an eviction that was already in place, but if you haven't been in court yet, you're not going to be evicted through July 25th if you're in public housing, if you're in Section 8, if you're in certain other situations as well. So a lot of people are having trouble paying their rent right now, and that is, I mean, you are not at all the only one. Everyone's in the same boat here. As much as we want to tell you that there's already been a comprehensive, action plan hammered out that helps make sure everyone is going to be okay. Obviously, the government's still working on that, but this is the information that we can give you as of right now that might be helpful. So, if you still have some income right now, if depending on what your job situation is like or your source of income, if you're still able to make some payments, or you think you can be making payments, again in the future once you get a little bit more stable, the first step really is to talk to your landlord and try to see if you can just work something out. A lot of landlords are going to be understanding at this time, and so you may just be able to work out with them a different payment schedule. Maybe you can figure out kind of like dates in the future where maybe you could make payment if you aren't able to make it right now. Whenever you make any sort of agreement like that, though, you absolutely need to get it written down if possible. Again, that doesn't mean that like the agreement never happened if it's not in writing, but it's really, really important to get it in writing. And when I say writing, that also includes any text messages. If you just want to text your landlord, or also emails, those are totally fine. It's just something that you can point to that says exactly what you're agreeing to. It's really important to have one of those. Just in general, because of that, anytime that you communicate with your landlord, it's going to be helpful if you can get it in some sort of writing, or maybe after you have a verbal conversation with your landlord, if you just want to follow up with a text message, just saying, hey, touching base about what we talked about, just so that it's in writing somewhere and no one has to argue as much about what exactly you agreed to. Now, for people who've already had an eviction filed against them and it already went to court and you already got something called a judgment by agreement. That means you went to court for this eviction, but instead of having the judge decide your case, you were able to make a settlement arrangement with the landlord about what you were going to do instead of having a judgment against you. So if you have a judgment by agreement that says that you're supposed to be making payments right now, and if you're having issues paying for that, again, confirm in writing that, talk to your landlord, try to see if they can come up with something to, help make it more feasible for you right now. I mean, what the landlord really needs is they just want to know that some money's coming. So generally speaking is, just making sure that they have that assurance that they're going to get paid eventually. Sometimes that's, the thing that they need. It's less important in some cases that, they'd be able to get the money today. Again, any changes that you make about your judgment by agreement, just try to make sure that you have it in writing and make sure that you've confirmed with the landlord that they're not going to move forward on an eviction. Right now, I can't tell you specifically exactly how the courts are treating evictions that have already been filed but that haven't come to court yet. So if you have one of those and you have questions about it, do give us a call, but I can't tell you specifically what's going to happen across the board. Again, about if you're in PHA housing, if you've suffered a sudden loss of income, you need to request a hardship waiver. It's something that you can apply for, which would give you a discount on what your rent obligation is right now. So you would need to email publichousing.answers@pha.phila.gov. There's an application that you would have to fill out for it. If you have especially if you haven't gone to court yet with your landlord, but you are worried in the near future that your landlord might want to take you to eviction court. If you think that you can get it worked out, a really great option is right now there's an organization called Good Shepherd, which is offering free virtual, like using a video call. Mediation sessions where they have a neutral third party. They're not paid by either side. They're not they're not there to fight for either side. They're just there to help try to facilitate, you and your landlord working something out in a way that can hopefully prevent you guys going to court. Okay, more things if you're having trouble paying your rent. So the two, prongs that you want to that you want to address if you're having difficulty paying your rent right now is that you want to work on trying to make sure that your situation with your landlord is, doesn't have you in immediate danger. And also naturally you're going to be trying to shore up your income to make sure that you're still, getting the things that you need. So if you have a job, if you lost your job, if you were employed recently, you may have job related benefits. You may have unemployment that you could get through that. There's also unemployment compensation. If you haven't applied for unemployment and you were fired recently because you think that you're not going to be eligible for it, I do recommend that you try applying again because they have just expanded the eligibility requirements for certain types of unemployment compensation. So there's a lot more situations now where you may be entitled to be able to get that kind of income. There's a lot of different programs out there that just exist to try to help people who are renters who are in trouble. Reach out to NKCDC. They can give you information about there's grants out there to help with utilities. There's various discount programs. The Office of Homeless Services has some programs to help, make payments for if you're behind on your rent. There's a lot of programs out there. I don't want to go into them too in depth in this presentation, but if if you think that you might be eligible for some type of financial assistance or you want to look into it, you can reach out to NKCDC, reach out to LCD. Also, Benephilly is an organization. They will help screen you for benefits that you could be eligible for, and they'll also help you do applications. So it's a really great organization to go to. They can give you lots of information about the specifics of every program that you might be eligible for. I would give them a call. Right now, my understanding is that they're doing applications over the phone, so you shouldn't need to go in person to an office. If you normally are receiving cash assistance through the county assistance office and you just lost your job, there right now is something available called a diversion. It's just kind of an advance on your cash assistance payments, so where you could get 1 to 3 months of assistance as a lump sum at once. And of course, this isn't extra money, on top of your normal. It's just that you'd be getting an advance on it. That might be helpful for you if you have, sudden medical bills right now or other, shorter term issues that you're trying to deal with financially. There's an organization called Clarify as well. They are a reputable organization. We work with them all the time. They offer free financial counseling over the phone. Right now, they're specifically offering, specialized counseling for COVID problems. So for a lot of people right now, they really could use a financial recovery plan, trying to figure out where to go from here. Or, if you're just kind of afraid, hey, at the rate that the money is going right now, it's going to dry up soon. Clarify may be able to help you with free financial counseling. They can help you come up with a plan, help you come up with a budget if you need to, just to get you through what's going on right now. So the phone number for them, as with Ben affiliates, is on this slide. Now, there's two programs that I want to specifically touch on that can provide financial assistance to renters. This one, so we're recording this on May 14th. Unfortunately, the due date for this is May 16th. The application window for it has been very, very short. So if you didn't hear about it, it's not that you missed much. It's just that it's been very sudden. So if you can apply right now, the city of Philadelphia has an emergency rental assistance program, which is specifically to help renters make their rent. You need to apply by 5:00 p.m. this Saturday, May 16th. The website for that is going to be phlrentassist.org. This is going to be available. It's not available for people in subsidized housing, but if you're in non-subsidized housing, and you do have a current written lease and you lost income due to COVID-19. That does not necessarily mean that you have to have COVID-19. It doesn't mean that one of your family members has to have it. It just means that you need to have lost income for some reason due to COVID. So that could also include like that you got laid off of your job or your employer closed, something like that. What the amount is that they're expecting for the applicants that they're able to assist, and of course we don't know exactly how many people are going to be able to be helped by this program, but for people who are going to be helped, they may get up to $2,500, taking into account household size and your income level. It's just something that they'll figure out there. Another requirement for eligibility for this particular program, you need to have been current on your rent as of March, and you cannot have already received an eviction notice. So you can't already be in eviction proceedings right now, and you need to have been current on your rent, and then COVID happened, and then it caused you to lose a bunch of income. So that's a program. Please apply for it as soon as possible. None of these programs come with guarantees, but the answer is always going to be a no if you don't try. So the state of Pennsylvania, the Department of Human Services also has a program running right now, which has a longer shelf life, the emergency cash assistance for families. Right now you can apply for this through the Compass website. You're probably familiar with that if you receive any type of public benefits. The application deadline for this is not coming up nearly so soon, but certainly do apply as soon as you can, because we're not exactly sure how long the program is going to last. It's slated to run through June 12th, but if they run out of funds sooner, it may close sooner. So please apply as soon as you can. Again, if you're not sure if you're eligible, you still just got to try anyway. These would also be one-time financial grants that would be based on household income and size. It would be a little bit smaller than if you were getting rental assistance. So these are going to be, as the title says, for families. So either you would need to have children or that you're pregnant. You need to have been employed as of March 11th. You need to have lost 50% of your income due to COVID. Again, it's that same thing where it doesn't mean that you had to be COVID positive. It just means that you had to have had an income loss because of COVID, which is a bit of a broader category. And you need to be low income. If the number means anything to you, you need to have 150% less under the federal poverty income guidelines. If you don't know if you're low income, or if that number doesn't mean anything to you, I would still apply, still just try. So right now, there's a bunch of things because of these moratoriums and these restrictions on evictions that your landlord is not allowed to do. Your landlord is not allowed to lock you out of your unit, to remove your belongings, or to tamper with your utilities right now. If you don't already have an eviction that you've already been to court for, if your landlord is just now threatening to evict you, or if they try doing one of these things, locking you out, putting all your stuff out on the sidewalk, or tampering with like your water or your electricity, something like that, those are all essentially types of evictions, and those are absolutely not permitted. Those things are never permitted, and but especially not right now. So if those things happen, I'm going to talk about that in a later slide, but just be aware, absolutely, if your landlord threatens to do that, they're absolutely not permitted to. Right now, because of the shelter-in-place order, your landlord is not allowed to, as far as the way that we would read the shelter-in-place order, your landlord is not allowed to access your unit for any reason other than emergency repairs. So if your landlord is showing up just to kind of harass you, or just to, show up without warning, you can just tell them, especially because right now there's a risk of contagion, and because of the shelter-in-place order, you're allowed to come in to do emergency repairs, but the landlord isn't allowed to just show up, without warning and declare, oh, I'm gonna, fix your sink or something. Right now, it has to be emergency repairs only. And I'll talk about that more again. As we talked about, they can't file any new evictions. So that would mean there's not going to be any new thing that they can do with the court to try to lawfully evict you. Obviously, sexual harassment is never okay, and it's never allowed, but we have heard from certain organizations that right now there's been an uptick in sexual harassment of tenants by their landlords. Definitely not allowed. They are not allowed to do this, period, but certainly they're not allowed to do it right now either. Because the shelter-in-place order prohibits quote-unquote real estate activities, that means that they should not be allowed to show your unit to potential renters. That might be something they're trying to do to sort of intimidate you about that they're going to evict you, or it just might be something that, that you guys, that's not a disagreement between you, but they can't do that right now because of the shelter-in-place order. They cannot threaten you with eviction or take any, negative legal action against you if you are COVID positive, or if you think that you may have been exposed to COVID. We've received several calls from people who are having issues like that with their landlords, where the landlord is saying, oh, well, you have COVID, so I can't have you around, so you got to leave. Or they're threatening, you've probably been exposed to it, if you were riding the bus or something, so you've got to leave. Those are not things that your landlord is allowed to permitted to do, is not permitted to do right now. So let's say that you need repairs in your unit. Obviously, this is a perpetual issue that people always deal with. Oh, and a question: can you refuse entry for emergency repairs if maintenance shows up without mask or gloves? That is a good question. I would say that you would want to certainly, explain that they need to have a mask and gloves if they're going to be doing an emergency repair. Try to take whatever measures you can to try to be away from them during emergency repair if they don't come in with personal protective equipment. Whether or not they're permitted to, I would imagine they probably are, but it's gonna be a kind of specific to your case issue. So that's something that, if that happens, I would recommend that people call us and talk to us about it. But hypothetically speaking, if your landlord shows up to do a legitimate emergency repair and they just don't have a mask on, unfortunately, my assumption would be they're probably allowed to do it. Just do everything you can to, try to, discuss that with them. Hey, you really need to be wearing a mask. I know it's an emergency, but, we can't be spreading this. If you can be in a different room while they're doing repairs, I would do that as well. So right now, because of the shelter-in-place order, as we talked about, only emergency repairs are allowed. If you are in PHA housing, as you already will know, there's a specific line that you call to report PHA needed repairs. That number's here on the screen. If you are not in subsidized housing, you're just in a regular lease with your landlord, but you have an emergency repair need, whatever way is quickest that you talk to your landlord, definitely tell them as soon as possible what the issue is. Again, just as I've talked about, you always want to have something in writing about your communication with the landlord. So if you have just a verbal conversation, if you just talk to them on the phone, I would just follow up with like an email or a text message talking about what this need is, why it's an emergency. If you cannot wait for your landlord to make a repair, or if your landlord's going to be slow in doing the repair, due to COVID or whatever else, You can discuss what we refer to as repair and deduct with your landlord, meaning you can always pay for the repair out of your own pocket if that's feasible for you, and then you can deduct it from your next rent. But that's something that you should, if you're able to discuss it with your landlord beforehand, please do give us a call if you have questions about it. So let's say that you have an illegal lockout. Again, this refers to either that the locks were changed, or it could also mean that the landlord took out your possessions and put them out on the street, or that they are tampering with your utilities, like they cut off your electric or your gas or something. Let's say that one of those things has happened. This is not a lawful thing for them to do, but so if this happens to you, call the police. Tell them that there is a crime in progress. Right now, the police are not responding to as many calls as they would normally, so you need to explain that this is currently happening in progress, or they're not likely to respond actually to your location. So definitely call the police, explain the situation. There is an illegal lockout currently happening, to try to get them to come and give you a police report. Once they've come, if you still don't have a way to get back into your unit, as much as nobody wants to break a window or something, if that's really crucial for you, you might have a way to get back in. If you can't, you need to call a locksmith, which is something that you would need to unfortunately pay for out of pocket, but save your receipts for that because you can submit it to your landlord and deduct that from future rent. If you are worried that your landlord is going to illegally lock you out, if the landlord has made threats like that to you, or due to the way they've been acting, if you feel like this is going to be a thing you have to worry about, lockouts, try to have a locksmith phone number in your phone. Take an old utility bill with you when you leave the house. Make sure that you have a form of ID on you when you leave, just in case if you're worried about an illegal lockout happening. Depending on exactly what happens, there may be a basis for you to sue your landlord in small claims court later on. That's something that you would discuss with an attorney like LCD. We're happy to discuss that with you.
And I also wanted to add that if you are illegally locked out and the police do not let you back in, the courts, although they are generally closed to the public, they are hearing cases for emergency petitions to restore possession. So that is something that we could most definitely help you with. If you give us a call, they are conducting those hearings. You can still file a petition to restore possession if you're locked out, if it's an emergency.
Great, excellent point, thank you. And just as a reminder, everything sucks right now. It's okay. It's okay if you're having a hard time. It doesn't mean that you failed at anything or that there's anything wrong with you. It's just a tough time right now. If you're feeling overwhelmed and like you just don't even have an idea of where to start with trying to get help, start with NKCDC. They can try to help you figure out what exact things in your life you could use help with and try to help you find resources that can help with that. You can also call LCD. We are happy to discuss any legal issues with you. You can call our landlord tenant helpline at the number that's on the screen, or you can email us. If you give us a call, or you can call our general intake, you will have an attorney return your call and discuss your case with you. If you email us at legalinfo@lcdphila.org, it's the same deal. If you're not even sure if your case is a legal issue, give us a call. We're happy to talk with you about it.